What about the DJI Agris that has been used to disinfect public areas? Or that New York bachelor who proposed to his neighbor across the street using a Mavic drone? And our African motherland was never going to be left behind. Zipline is delivering COVID-19 test kits in Ghana. And right here, Mzansi, a COVID-19 educational campaign has been undertaken by the Tzaneen municipality with the help of Untitled Aviation Services. And finally, what about this awesome footage of an empty but beautiful city of Cape Town, which we may never see again, at least in my lifetime? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. These are the stories of our young and dynamic drone industry. This is the decade of the drone, but we have to embrace ourselves. We have to brace ourselves for a new normal. If you have had enough of the COVID-19 cliches, phrases like social distancing, epicenter, flattening the curve, you may want to add this one to your vocabulary, the so-called new normal. But we would rather you thrive in this new normal than merely survive. Thanks for the Cape Town video. My name is Victor Khadebe, and I'm the program director for the Mzansi Drone Accelerator, which was established out of an urgent need to create another new normal in this young drone industry, which looks like it was crafted in the 70s for a privileged few. But Zizojig isn't, and that's our promise. But today, let's not go there. There will be time for that in the future. Now, in the words of my favorite CNN anchor, Fareed Zakaria, let's get started. Today, we meet on the eve of the lockdown downgrade from level 5 to level 4, but I'm sure you are not looking forward to going back to work because you have been at work all along. But you are probably looking forward to going back to your structured office away from that cluttered home, and to see your colleagues who will be all wrapped up in their PPE and observing social distancing. But I know most of you will not be rushing back to their offices at the same speed as my son will be rushing tomorrow to order his chicken-licking hot wings from Uber Eats. Welcome to the Decade of the Drone Again webinar series, brought to you by DroneCon in partnership with Untitled Aviation Services, our sponsor. DroneCon is an annual coming together of the drone industry, and the 2020 edition will be co-located with Transport Evolution Conference and exhibition down in Durban in October, COVID permitting. This is the decade of the drone, and our industry will come of age. But we would like you to thrive in this new normal. To this end, we have a great lineup of speakers and panelists who will share their thoughts about what lies ahead of this industry. We will also take a deep dive into security and surveillance, and our speakers will share with you their thoughts on this rather sensitive topic that is often the target of the privacy pressure groups. Without much further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce our first speaker, who is the president of CUASA, the industry body, and the CEO of UDH Group, Mr. Sean Reitz. Sean, the floor is yours.
Hi, Victor. Yeah, thank you. I prepared a presentation, so let me get started that without further ado. Yeah, absolutely. Updating us on the status of the drone in 2020 was quite interesting to set this presentation up. So, firstly, to everybody, thank you for attending, and just a little bit about ourselves. The UDH Group is the company that I represent. I'm also the president of CUASA, which is the Commercial Aviation's Drone Industry Association. So our company, the UDH Group, comprises of a number of drone verticals, including a training organization, RPAS, Advanced Aerial, which is a mining and security focused business, Commercial Drones, which is a DJI Enterprise dealer, and Drone Ops, which is a licensed operator. When I look back at the South African landscape, I think it's important to see where we came from. So from when regulations first came in 2015, the drone industry really struggled to get going. And one of the major hurdles with that really was around regulation. So if I look at 2018, in 2018, there were really only 26 ROC operators that had been approved by the CAA. And there was a lot of turbulence in the industry. It was taking a long time. People were very frustrated. If we look forward to 2020 today, we can see there's been a dramatic increase in the number of RSC licenses that have been issued. And when I had a look on the CA website yesterday, there's 63 operators that have been approved. And one of the interesting areas that are showing growth as well is really around corporate RSCs. In other words, companies getting drone licenses. So in 2018, there was only one. And when I looked yesterday, there were actually 5. So you can see that a number of corporates are getting into this industry as well. For a long time, it felt like the industry was really being hampered by regulations and around getting, just trying to get started and moving. And my sense was that in 2019, we had real movement in the industry. There were a number of RSCs that had been issued, and I think there were around about 40 odd that were sort of in final phase. So we were looking to get close to 100 RSCs, and the industry was really starting to come along quite nicely, in my view. So coming into 2020, we sort of looked at this industry and said that 2020 was going to be the start of the decade of the drone. 2020 was going to be a big year for the drone industry in our view, and there was a lot of positivity. I mean, there will always be challenges, and there will always be people that are not satisfied with everything, but the general sense was that 2020 was really going to be the start of something important. And unfortunately, the next thing that happened was that COVID came, and COVID really has had a significant impact on all of us. On the 26th of March, South Africa went into lockdown, and I think the 26th of March of 2020 will be seen as the day that South African businesses changed forever. And I think everybody will look back and know what happened or where they were on the 26th of March. We conducted a survey amongst part of the group that's present today, just to try and get an understanding of where people are in terms of their head. And we asked the question around how fearful are you on your own personal safety? And the results were interesting. People are not that concerned about their own personal safety, but they're quite concerned about their family. I suppose it makes sense. If I look at myself, your parents or older people that are in your family are more at risk. And so it's natural to have more concern for them. And the one thing that didn't surprise me at all was really around the fact that people are worried about business. Business is the component that's suffering tremendously. I suppose in the drone industry, it really boiled down to an essential versus non-essential. If you happen to be part of the essential services, drone companies were able to carry on. Essential services included mining operations, security, some agriculture, etc. I suppose if you were in the non-essential category, you were potentially in lockdown and potentially feeling real pressure because of inability to trade. In terms of the survey results going forward, we asked people, in terms of the number of staff that they're employing at the moment, are you likely to increase your staff complement? Are you going to keep it the same? Or are you likely to go into cost reduction mode and reduce your staff? It was quite nice to see that drone companies, generally speaking, are quite supportive of maintaining their staff or even increasing it in some cases. But when it came to the view on revenue, it definitely seems that a number of companies are seeing that revenue numbers will be reducing over time in 2020. The one slide that really was quite heartening for me is that the question was, in 2020, will you use less drones than you used in 2019, the same amount of drones, or would you look to use more drones or better drones? And there's absolutely a sense that the drone technology is going to be used more frequently and to a greater extent in the future, which is really good for the future of the drone industry. The drone industry really does come through from technology, and this video helps to explain a little bit.
Sean, can you check the sound on the video?
So if we look at the outlook of the drone industry globally, I think it's important to consider what's happening in the US. And last week I attended a webinar by Frost & Sullivan, the global research company. And it was really interesting to hear their view. I mean, if you are interested, you can go and find the document and see the review yourself. But effectively, in the US context, the view is that the market's actually going to be growing quite slowly, sort of single-digit growth. And the one thing that was really surprising is that in terms of revenue, the numbers we're looking at sort of 0.6% revenue growth. So that means that from a US view, the pricing of drones is going to be coming down, and the market's not growing that much, which is quite a divergent view from previously, where this industry was exponentially exploding and growing. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that, but one of them is still around the regulatory framework in the US market. In terms of drones globally, during the COVID period, we've seen a lot of new use cases coming up for drones, and some of them I think have been really, really sensible, and some of them, in my opinion, have been less practical. So I think, as Victor mentioned earlier on, drones have been used for spraying and sterilizing areas. Zipline has looked at increasing its presence in delivering in the US. And we've even seen DJI Mavics being used to try and take people's temperatures, although I don't believe that that's a clear use case for that particular drone. In terms of the South African context and certainly the webinar that we're involved with today, I think the security and public safety space is seeing a lot of drone activity at the moment, and for good reason. I think it's an eye in the sky, and you'll see presentations and discussions later on today that will really talk to the use cases and the reason that drones are becoming a sensible tool for the future. There's a lot of software that's coming out and that will play a role in creating an environment where drones are not just about a tool or about a pilot. It's really about an ecosystem where software does provide the capability to get better information. I'm not sure if this video is, or you're able to hear the videos playing properly, but the idea is really around being able to identify people in the drone, because now you've got a visual of them that you actually want to know who it is and where they are, and to be able to better find them if we look at the future of the drone industry in South Africa, I think there's a couple of things that come to mind with it. Firstly, I think that you're going to find that drones in the public sector are going to be used a lot more widely. And the reason for this is really around the practical and easily understood benefits of the drone technology. And you're starting to see that, and I think that will be spoken about later in the webinar. And then also in the private security industry, we're seeing an understanding of the benefit drones will bring. And there's starting to be a significant uptake in that as well. I think the next point is that Moore's law is absolutely at play. And I think that drone technologies are improving, and you'll see new products that will be released in 2020 that will potentially be game-changing and change the landscape. And then the final view that I have is that I think drone piloting is a real career opportunity now. It's gone from being a bit of a fringe for hobbyists and radio control operators to being a proper job and an area that people can develop a real career in aviation. And I think the COVID impact we'll see a lot more focus on online learning platforms, and hopefully the regulators will be looking at that space and allowing us to be able to reach more people in more remote locations. So, in my view, we've got a bright future in the drone industry. I think it's important that we stay focused on what we're trying to achieve, that we remain optimistic. I think optimism is really important, and that we remain confident that the technology does have a place and that it has a place for good. And with that, I say, let's create an enabling environment, and I think.
Great, Sean. Thank you so much for a great presentation. And yes, we are operating under a new normal. And besides, the drone industry will come of age, and that's what we believe in. But whilst we allow Jack to load his presentation, Jack, you can continue just sharing your screen. Sean, there's three factors of the drone. Okay, you've got the airframe, you've got the payload, you've got the software. If you were to rank what's going to become more important as we move towards the end of this decade, how would you rank everything, Sean?
I think that you need the airframe to be able to carry the payload. But I think the Frost and Sullivan survey last week was talking about the improvements of payload and the consolidation of various different payload technologies together. So I think the payloads are going to be really important. But Victor, it's an ecosystem. If you don't have the software, you probably can't analyze the data that the payload's delivering. So unfortunately, from my perspective, I don't think it's that easy to choose any one of them, because they do operate together. But I think that what's going to be really interesting over time is going to be around the software that's able to deliver really useful insights and actionable data coming from the payload carried by the airframe.
Sean, thank you so much. I was going to say, give him a round of applause, but you won't hear it. But it's something that you can continue to vote on it. And I can see that we've got quite a huge audience from all across the continent and even from abroad. And I'd like you to, if you have questions, just go down to Q&A and just post your question there. You can chat if you want. You can post your comment. Right at the end, we'll try and get through to your questions. Our next speaker is the MD of Untitled Aviation Services. These are the people who did that wonderful work in the Tzaneen municipality. And to share this with us is the MD, Mr. Jack Shilobana, who's going to share with us what they did there and what the future holds for the drone industry. Jack is an IT man. He's worked for the correctional services. He's been within the space of IT. And Untitled Aviation Services is part of the big Untitled group. Jack, over to you. Please share your presentation with us.
Okay, thank you, Victor, and thank you everyone for attending the webinar. I am going to be talking a little bit about what we were doing in Tzaneen and the work that we did around enabling the monitoring of COVID-19 compliance and mainly the messaging that we were supporting the police and the municipalities in terms of getting it through to the villages in Tzaneen. I have put up a screen there just to show the Untitled Consulting Group, which is a company that was started over 15 years ago, and we have got a presence in a number of places. We have got, we serve about 25 municipalities and all that. I'm just giving you a sense of what the company is about broadly, and we have about 5 subsidiaries. One is revenue enhancements, business consulting, industrialization. We have a ticketing platform, and then there is the aviation space, which is what I am heading. Now, in terms of what I am going to be talking about, we know that the latter part of last year and mainly this year, we have been facing the COVID-19 pandemic, and which required us to be able to be innovative in terms of how do we tackle the pandemic of COVID-19. And one of those things that we did was to say, we believe there are a number of areas that drone technology can help. And one of those is on messaging. The other one is around helping with sanitizing. We know that drones are very good at spraying disinfectants and fertilizer and all those. And we said we can move into that space and do that kind of work. And when we engaged with the city of Tzaneen, we then began to look at the messaging route with the police, and it was found that the greater Tzaneen municipality has over 100 villages, and reaching out to most of those people in terms of messaging and being able to monitor compliance to the regulations that are there, it's a challenge. And we moved in, we said, let's use drone technology to support the police, to do the monitoring of compliance, to help in terms of ensuring that the most outlying areas, in particular the hotspots, can first get the message, but secondly, we can monitor that compliance, and we can also have the police being able to move into those spaces where there is non-compliance. And we did that drone-based surveillance and monitoring work in conjunction with the police. We identified, and the police and the municipalities identified a number of hotspots which they wanted support using the technology to monitor those. And our role was to really provide them the images, was to really provide them the platform to be able also to speak to some of those communities, through interactive broadcasts wherever it was necessary. And it was really a project that we did not think it will have the level of publicity and success that it has had. And we are looking now at ensuring that as we broaden this kind of work, it will feed into municipalities, it will feed into the police and the command councils being able to based on the looking at the levels of compliance that are improving or seeing that people are not complying, you can be able to use empirical information, scientific information to say, here we believe the level, we can lower the level maybe from risk level 4 to risk level 3 because people are complying. And that we have found to be very effective. It will actually be based on reliable information that people can see, that people can be able to audit and say, yes, we can see this improvement. We could see as we were looking at, and Tzaneen is a very, it's a very rural area where there are very few malls. It's not like here. There is, for instance, the market plaza where most of the people, because they are not allowed to be moving to town, they've divided the area to say you can shop here and you can shop on this side so that you don't have many people, coming into one area. We found that as we were flying over the area, the queues were long, the taxis, we could see a disaster waiting to happen. But as we were continuing to share the message over the drones, you could see the response of the people in terms of creating the necessary social distance and spaces between them. And we were then able to see that the message was coming through to those communities. People were beginning to understand through that reinforcement, because it's not a kind of thing that you say once over the radio, but it's something that you need to keep on repeating to say, there is a real danger here. Please keep your social distance. Please wash your hands with soap. Please make sure that you stay home, you go out only when it's necessary. That people are beginning to get this message. And I'm just sharing that slide to show the areas that we're focusing on. We're looking at compliance monitoring, which is your surveillance, inspections of those particular sites, which were prioritized as sites where, high priority site where there is potential danger of infection. We're looking at if people in those sites are wearing masks, keeping the social distance. And then the messaging side, which we recorded the message and we were taking it to the various areas, and we were using interactive messaging to speak to the people, even those that were not complying. And then one of the things that one would actually want to say is to comment on, it's this pandemic as we see it now is probably providing a fertile ground for the adoption of drones across a number of areas. And law enforcement, and we have seen in Zanin as we engaged with the police have been saying that this is the tool that we need to use for the future. So this is providing fertile ground for people to look at different and unconventional ways that they are used to in terms of enforcement. And drones, I think, are going to become the new normal, as part of the sub-theme is saying. People are beginning to see the value. A drone is going to be a friend to the policeman, to the law enforcement officer going forward. As we see, social distancing is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. One of the best ways to try and police, to try and see, to try and monitor that will be the use of drones. These will be used to support efforts of law enforcement. They will be used for crowd control and monitoring, and they will be used as part of the first response, to emergency situations and other situations that will be emerging in the area of law enforcement. One of the things, and I'm sure some of the speakers will be speaking to this, is that drones, whilst they are good, they have become an avenue for bypassing security systems, whether it's in the mines, whether it's in the prison systems, and in many other areas. And that is why departments, law enforcement officers, and those charged with security need to look at ways of ensuring that the skies are monitored, national key points are being protected against all that vulnerability. And this is a challenge that those who are charged with national security will need to look at. And I was speaking to somebody a few days ago who was saying that in one of the mines, some uncut diamonds disappeared, and they tried to check where it was, but somebody had claimed afterwards that the drone that they had been flying in the mine actually flew away, and they could not have control of it, and it disappeared. And this presents a challenge that drones can be used to smuggle things out and to smuggle things into places. And this is one of those other things that probably criminal elements are taking advantage of technology, whilst those charged with securing spaces are not looking at the advantage, are not looking at ways of dealing with the new threats that are also being emerging because of drone-based technology. So I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm not going to speak more beyond that. I'll just leave it at that. And then I have asked Victor just to share a small video with us of some of the things that we did in Zanin. Thank you.
Awesome, Jack. Thank you so much for a great presentation. And I know between yourself and Shoni, there are questions that are going to be asked about whether what you guys did was approved by the CAA, and I'm sure you guys will deal with it. But I don't want this to be the subject of discussion, because the final arbiter in this matter is CAA, and anyone has the right to approach CAA and ask about this. And it's a matter that I've taken up with both Jack and Shoni, and as far as I'm concerned, it was above board, but CAA is the final arbiter on this one. We're now going to go to our panelists. Can I please see my beautiful panelist? Where's Kim? Where are you, Kim? We're now going to get into the panel discussion. The first part of this panel discussion is just going to be an introduction. I'm going to start. We've got Mr. Sam Chauke, the CEO of CIRA, because this topic that we are talking about is security and surveillance. And he's a man who's basically the regulator for the whole private security industry. We know you cannot be able to do security work without a CIRA accreditation or partnered with a CIRA accredited entity. We've got Kim James from Drone Guards, Mr. Berama Singh from BM Global. But I'm not going to do their introduction. They're going to do their introductions themselves. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Chauke, the CEO of CIRA, and also just talk about what CIRA is and what it does and how does it fit into the drone industry. Let's give it to you, just the introduction in no more than 120 seconds. Over to you, sir. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. Morning to all our participants and the panelists. CIRA is a regulatory body in the private security industry. How we fit in the picture of drones is that we foresee drones to be utilized in the industry quite extensively in the performance of the work in the future. So we will be looking forward to guiding the industry how to get into regulatory conduct in the use of drones and so on. So we look forward to an interaction with the members.
Thank you, people. Don't forget Q&A at the bottom. Hit us with those questions. There's no question that it shouldn't be asked. Whatever question, we'll try and answer it. If we can't answer it, we'll try and find an answer for you. But I'd like us to take the discussion mainly around issues of security surveillance, as we've seen during COVID-19, because this is a serious matter. To that end, I'm going to now bring Kim.
Thanks, Victor. And first of all, thank you so much for the invitation, Victor and DroneCon, to be part of this panel. I'm thrilled to be here. So my name is Kim James. I'm a director in a company called UAV Aerial Works. We're a drone operator regulated by the South African Civil Aviation Authority. And I'm also, for my sins, the safety and security post holder. I'm a director of our brand called Drone Guards, which we use to deliver aerial surveillance services in the security space. So the focus on Drone Guards for us is to secure people and high value assets by essentially creating an air force for security companies where they secure residential estates and commercial sites. We in effect add a layer of defense to the existing security operations by working extremely closely with the security company's ground force. So we see the future for any security operation being less reliant on the human element and more geared towards technology, which at this point in time, in its most basic form, is the eye in the sky with the video feed into a control room. This, of course, protects the security guard or the armed response on the front line in the first instance, and gives information before a decision is even made as to how to intervene. In the future, once regulations have evolved, we see drone security operations moving more towards autonomous flight, dare I say, and also what the data being gathered can do from an artificial intelligence perspective. So in closing for this segment, our management team has almost 50 years combined aviation experience in both military and manned. There's software and engineering background. And so we're well placed to launch our own security mission specific drone in the near future with relevant software and AI system in our company called Sky Robots. And to what Sean said earlier, it's the ecosystem of payload and software to make meaningful decisions in the security and surveillance space in the future. So I'll leave it there for now and hand back to you, Victor.
Thank you, Kim. Please, whatever questions you have, you now know what these panelists of ours are doing. I'm now going to move to Mr. Masinga, a man from KZN. Mr. Masinga, please introduce yourself.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Victor, and the rest of the DroneCon people. My name is Beka Masinga. I'm the CEO of a company called BM Global, which is a diversified investment company. We operate in many sectors, including mining, manufacturing, and also defense. Particularly defense is the sector that got in our interest into this venture or this drone accelerator, because we're part of an incubation program at Armsco where our team of engineers are working on developing the country's first radar and electronic warfare mission planning software, which will then go into a locally indigenous or indigenous South African mission computer. And the aim around that is around protecting sovereign security. So as we talk about drones, if one brings the perspective of defense, most of these drones, if maybe not all, will be carrying foreign software and probably manufactured from foreign countries. Now, from a sovereign defense or national security point of view, there's going to be interesting conversations around how do we make sure that these drones are not used for the negative things that we're talking about. So our company, BM Global, has been being part of that sector. We've also been involved in delivering a UAV solution in one of the South African countries for border protection. So my talk will also talk about various applications of drones in the defense sector, both our land, air, all borders, land, air, and sea borders, and seeing what opportunities could be there for drones, and also looking at the issue of protection of national key points and what is called critical infrastructure. But I'm looking forward to participating and lots of learning from this team. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Masinga. Obviously, BM Global is one of our the corporate innovation partners of our drone accelerator. So is UDH. Anyway, let's move on. Where's Shoni? Shoni, where are you? Shoni's shy.
Right,
He's from
yeah.
Cape Town. Let's forgive him. He's a man from Cape Town.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Victor, are you receiving me?
Yes, I am.
There we go. I'm here representing Step Above. As a lot of our attendees know, we conducted the Cape Town lockdown flight, one of many flights that were done. I believe ours was the only one done by an ROC. I'm here. Step Above is quite a new ROC and quite a small team, but what we benefit from is that our sector by sector expertise is quite strong. And I come from a narrative of commercial filmmaking and mostly narrative communication. And I think that that's a very important thing to focus on, especially when we're talking about the intersection of drones and security. Because as much as we ourselves get excited about the possibilities and the potential of drone use in this industry, the thing that we'll primarily come up against is public sentiment. And public sentiment feeds government sentiment, and government sentiment feeds regulatory oversight. So the thing that I loved about Jack's project, and I think that something that our project did quite successfully, is that it very clearly communicated the public benefit and thus national benefit of the use of drones. And I think that in any of these applications that we're talking about, it's important to package them in ways that communicate their benefit to both the public and the government at large. So something that we feel quite well placed to do and are always ready to do is that there's so many exciting drone projects happening in South Africa. And and there's so many exciting drone projects happening around the world, but none of the content that you see is South African centric. So something we'd love to push and love to collaborate with all ROCs and all security stakeholders on is how to package those narratives in something that can get the public excited, get government excited, while also communicating compliance, safety, and legality. Thank you, Victor. Victor, we can't hear you at the moment.
Apologies. I thought I'm on the stage. Apologies. Thank you, Shani, for your great presentation. And yes, well done on that video. We're still going to play Jack's video later on. But I'm just going to, we're supposed to also have Mr. David Likota from JMPD, because as we know that public safety is critical, not only private security, but public safety is critical. We've seen the use of drones in the public sector space. There's a report that I saw in the US that compared 2019 to 2017. There's been a growth from around under 100 police agencies that were using drones. And by the end of 2019, that number had grown towards up to about 900. And it's important, but we hope we're still going to get him on the line, Mr. David Likota from JMPD. I'm going to come back to Sean. I just want you to talk briefly about some of the regulatory issues. Okay, regulatory issues. One of the questions that is coming up, for instance, is issues relating to who can fly over people, who can fly over roads. And because if you read, for instance, Part 101, you can realize that these restrictions are so stringent. And yeah, can you just talk about that? Because the issue of regulations come into play when you fly over people, fly over buildings and all of that.
Yeah, thank you, Victor. I mean, I'm probably not the ideal person when it comes to getting very specific around regulation, as much as it's something that I spend a lot of time with, and I've engaged with the CAA on literally hundreds of occasions over the last couple of years. The fine detail is really not something that I'm really good at. What I can say though is that you know, everything is possible, because if one looks at Part 101, there's a whole bunch of cons. You can't fly over people, you can't fly over roads, you can't fly at night, you can't fly in controlled airspace, etc., without the permission of the director. And so every ROC holder, and like I said, there's 63 of them that have been approved as at last night when I had a look. Every one of those companies has gone and put together an OPSPEC and have had that OPSPEC approved by the CAA. And if you had to look at all 63 of them, you'd find that they're all quite different. They may have similarities, but each of them have applied for slightly different things. So theoretically, if you are if you're Kim and you want to fly in a residential estate, you have to be able to prove to the CAA that you can conduct your operations in a safe way. And so they would have specifically looked at the privacy risks, the flying over houses, landowner permission, things like that, and would have been able to have the OPSPEC approved around that. So I think the message is that with permission, there's a lot that can be done, but the regulations are quite strict, and it's certainly not a free-for-all from a regulatory point of view. I think coming in the next little while that we'll see as the regulation gets stretched a bit is really around a longer range BV loss. So think of deliveries, medical deliveries, etc., and then fully autonomous flights, or at least more autonomous flight operations. So drones running off induction pads and flying around a patrol on their own under the supervision of a person. But that's still something for the future. I think at the moment, Part 101 is a fairly comprehensive piece of regulation and quite strict and relatively challenging to comply with.
Thank you, Sean. Jack, where are you? Come on, please. I know drones are associated with urban areas. We are supposed to see drones in the urban areas, as we've seen in some of the cities in China. What was the reaction of the people from Zanin? I mean, these are the people who probably seldom see even an aircraft, manned aviation aircraft. What was the reaction when they saw drones flying over and this aircraft that is even talking to them. What was the reaction?
I think for me, that was one of the most gratifying things, to be able to see images of young people, even old people really, looking at the drone, being fascinated by it, and on top of it, it was speaking to them, and it was speaking to them in a language that they understand, because we used Xitsonga and Sepedi, which are languages that are spoken in the area. So it was quite fascinating to see the reaction of young people and old people looking at it. And they would go out there and sometimes would go a little bit lower and begin to speak to them. And it was one of those satisfying, gratifying things. We flew over a village in which I was born, for instance, and I saw people that would have been, children that would have been me 46 years ago or 42 years ago. And that for me was a very emotional and personal moment for me. And I found that I enjoyed that reaction, and I thought we are making an impact that probably I did not even expect to be, because we are then bringing people to think about new possibilities, to say you could get into aviation as a career coming from this village. So there were those responses which for me were quite gratifying, and for me it was even more personal, I think, coming from a background, a village background, as the ones that are in Zanin.
Thank you so much. I'm going to bring Mr. Chauke. Mr. Chauke, you and I spoke about this matter before DroneCon in 2019. It's the whole issue of privacy, okay? And you got whenever a drone flies over people, whenever drone is collecting, whatever it hovers over, whatever, what comes up, it's all the privacy issues, okay? Now, let me probably step away from the drone space. Google and Apple have teamed up to do some tracing of COVID patients. And we know what Google does with your data, and we know what Facebook does with your data. Why is it the issue of privacy, it becomes so emotionally charged when a drone flies? We've seen in the US, a police officer was looking at people, social distancing, counting, and then this thing was shut down because of privacy laws there. Why is it so prevalent with a drone? Because I'm saying this because the security cameras, the fixed security cameras, are collecting our data. Whenever, you go into a building, they collect your ID, your data and everything. No one asks what's going to happen with this data, what people are going to do with it. Why is it that when it comes to drone, it becomes so emotionally charged? Mr. Chauke, I'm putting you on the spot on this one.
Yeah, thank you very much, Victor. The issue of privacy is something that is well entrenched in our constitution, as you know, that everyone has got the right to have his privacy protected. So I suppose the first answer to that is that it's a violation of privacy, and people view it as a violation of privacy. And without proper guidelines of people knowing what is it to do, how do we really control the use of drones and so on, people will always be aggrieved around the issue of privacy. So it's quite a very difficult question to answer, Victor, I must say, especially if one has to be very broad in that sense. But other than saying the issue of privacy is quite very entrenched. Even in South Africa, it's an issue everywhere around the world.
Yeah. Kim, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think, when all of us started our journey on social media and signed up, and by that stage we'd already been ticking, have you read terms and conditions, et cetera, et cetera. I think we've been through a number of years of desensitization around knowing what our data is being used for. And some people still have an issue with it, and others, like myself, I know every click is followed on Google and Facebook and what have you, you know, the remarketing, etc. So we know that our information is being used, albeit within guidelines. I think from a drone perspective, we all watch too many movies, you know, Oblivion, etc., where, you know, drones come alive. The point is, you know, if you're flying at 30 meters and, you know, you're on a mission to do a perimeter patrol, etc., we are not wanting to see what's going on in someone's swimming pool or someone's garage or looking through someone's window. So the desensitization process, for us anyway, has started, and it's a process of education. What are we doing with that data? And, you know, 99% of the time, nothing to report. And on the odd occasion where we do have something that we're actually using for investigation or follow-up review from a footage perspective, it's all above board and available for anyone to see, you know, through the right channels. So for us in residential estates, it's very much around education, open days, information leaflets. What are we using the information for? And it's open book in terms of why are we doing it, when are we doing it, and how are we you know, saving and deleting footage, etc. So I think the desensitization process is still in its infancy stage, and people will get used to it. The reactions will be varied, but I think we'll get to a point where people know that the benefits will outweigh the concerns.
It's quite interesting because Dwayne Moller here is asking, is a drone a foe or a friend? Okay, what I think is happening here, I think let's be clear which drones we are talking about. Okay, there's two extremes of drones. You've got toys and you've got weapons of mass destruction. Okay, and we are talking here about commercial drones, which happen to be right in the middle. These are drones for good. These are drones that are bringing efficiencies to how we work. Yes, we're not used to them. We know what Uncle Sam is using the drones for. When people think about drones, they think about killing and maiming of people. We're talking about commercial drones, not WMDs. Okay, now let's maybe take a spin here. Berger, you come from an aerospace and defense. Okay, there was if you remember last year, there was a gender-based violence in Cape Town where someone shot a video. He thought, wow, it was a great video from a drone footage. It was right above the protesters, but it so happened to be about a meter from another national key point, which is Parliament. Okay, so this guy, not only did he violate the flying over people, but he flew over a national key point. What is the importance of national key points, Berger, from the point of view of safeguarding national key points using drones on the one side, but also safeguarding the national key points, prisons, nuclear plants, from encroachment from a drone technology? Can you speak on that one, Berger?
Thank you, Victor. Very interesting conversations. I think, look, for the people that should be on this platform, there's enough movies, there's enough information, you know, that I don't have to go down deep into what could happen if somebody flew a drone over a prison and what they could possibly be doing if they are a criminal or a friend of a criminal in a prison. In the same way as if a foreign party wants to cross our border to come and take the diamonds. So the various possibilities of what could possibly happen, I think is there, as one of the panelists has already said, that there's enough of the technology in the movies. I think where I would like to probably make a contribution is to say that a platform such as this, we need to really work hard to get the lawmakers into these discussions, because there are two things that I think are a challenge here. One is that we are being challenged as the human race to actually almost like forced changes. If you think about what the lockdown is doing, and the drone technology is here, and some of the speakers have already said that it is here to stay. What we need to be doing is to probably working hard as the people interested in the industry to equip our law enforcement arms in various sectors. So from judiciary, police, the military, about the right narrative. I like what Hloni is saying, and in my remarks, I want to talk a little bit about the significance of what Hloni is saying, because Hloni is talking about the mindset. The big issue is the mindset. People see drones even at game. The issue is changing the mindset. The issue about desensitizing of people as well, it's just a process that humans go through. If you think about, people were very worried when we started having phones with the camera capability that I could be sitting here taking a picture and taking a picture of the person behind you. But we've gotten used to people taking pictures in restaurants. You don't even care whether they are taking a picture of you or not, because this has become a norm. As long as people know that the cell phone, you cannot dispute the benefits of the cell phone. The issue is that drones, the benefits of drones is not yet well known, even to law enforcement agencies. How many police officers in South Africa have actually been in a demonstration of a highly capable drone system? It hasn't happened. So I think as industry, we must draw closer law enforcement and create platforms to expose them so that we create awareness about the benefits. And then people like Hloni must really be called to this, to change the narratives. Villagers, government officials are also people like us who also get spooked by novelty and something that is new. So if we have more stories that are in everybody's face of how a drone works and how a drone can be used for good, and we equip law enforcement to be able to manage the flip side of the risk where criminals get their hands on this technology and are able to use it. But technology for all the problems we're discussing here is already existing, either to jam and control drones, or to control where drones can fly, cannot fly, what they are doing, what chemicals. The technology is already there, and even any problem we can imagine, there is a technological solution, but the mindset is the issue, mindset of society and the mindset of officials. And I think the solution to unleashing the potential for this drone industry lies heavily in what Hloni keeps talking about.
Okay, I'm glad you're bringing the issue of jamming a drone, okay? Although you're not going to be able to do that with a drone that is autonomously flown, okay? By the way, when you jam my drone, when you jam somebody's drone, whatever happens to that drone, if it's got explosives, if it falls on somebody else, you take full responsibility as far as that drone is concerned. Anyway, let's pass there. You mentioned a very important issue about public awareness, and this is something that is close to Hloni's heart. Hloni, I think what Jack did in Tzaneen, okay, these are some of the stories that we've seen companies like Zipline doing in places like Rwanda, Tanzania, where we've seen technology that is in the fourth industrial revolution that has been taken to the villages, people who probably don't even have smartphones, okay? Hloni, how do you think, and who should be driving this public participation campaign that educate people? Because I think the issues of privacy about drones, it's more from an ignorance point of view as opposed to them knowing what drones can do or can't do. Hloni?
Sorry, I completely agree. I think that the big issue that we're having right now is that we've got good friends at Google, and they kind of feed us when they see a drone story spike in South Africa. And the things that have gained the most traction, the things that have seen the most eyes, on one hand, wildlife does very well. People love seeing giraffes run across the Sahara, but the things that actually get the most coverage are these issues of non-compliance, right? Right now, the most popular COVID-themed video in South Africa is of that beer delivery, right? Of the guy sending that six-pack across the field. And that's a direct fault of us as operators. People who are using drones for good, people who bring those applications, and we know tactilely the benefit that drones can bring, we communicate in these forums, right? We communicate in these spaces that have a restricted audience, and also in forms that are only adopted or read by a captive audience, right? We have to package our drones for good message in ways that are consumed by the masses. And the simplest form of that is video, right? So, and Jack brought up something that's incredibly relevant when you talk about not only the South African environment, but also the drone environment. It's not an ethereal opportunity cost for drones to not be deployed in South Africa, right? When public sentiment is bad, when regulatory sentiment is bad, and drones don't fly, there's a direct negative cost to that happening, right? We speak 11 official languages in South Africa. The message of COVID, the message of self-isolation, the message of social distancing, that's something that has to be communicated to all of the people in our nation. And drones are, frankly, the most effective technology to do that. But if we waffle, if we let ourselves lag behind, that messaging of social distancing doesn't get spread, right? And that's not a what if, that's not a loose thing. You're putting people's lives at risk, right? And it's because we haven't successfully communicated to the public, to government, to regulators, the positive possibility of drones, that those people are being put in risk. So I would say it's less about like waiting till we get desensitized. The reason why we're comfortable with Facebook having our information, the reason why we're comfortable with cell phones having cameras, is day to day, we know the positive benefits of those technologies existing. We're vaguely aware of the negative externalities of that, but we have a very immediate sense of why these things are good. And if we as drone operators and members of the industry make the thing that is positive, make the good thing the first thing you think of when you think of drones, when you see a drone, you should think about Jack's video. You should think about people successfully being communicated to. And if we bring that positive narrative first in their mind, then we immediately skip the desensitization step, right? Because drones are so new that people don't have a solid opinion on it. The only countries in the world that have stricter drone laws than us are the countries that have had US Predator drones fly over them, right? So when you talk about sentiment, we're not winning that battle, right? Because we're far closer to drones as weapons of mass destruction than we are to drones as a public good. And that starts with public sentiment.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to take you up on that as far as the public participation is concerned, but I'd like to invite the CAA, because CAA is part of an initiative of the Department of Transport called Joint Aviation Awareness Program. They're very good at taking it to the remotest of places, but they forget the drone industry. It's like CAA is the CAA of the manned aviation. I think now that aviation is kind of like slowed down, we need to just get them back to the drone industry so that they help grow this industry, because up until now, anyway, let me not get too much on the CAA. I'm going to get myself in trouble. By the way, Jack, someone from, Mr. Rudzani Makeda from Bembe TVET College, he wants your contact details. He saw what you did in Zani and he's become very, 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 very jealous. By the way, at that TVET College, we're going to be launching our drone accelerator there. And we'd like to go out to the public. And Shoni, I'd like to take you to places like this, and Jack, so that we can basically grow this industry and create that awareness for people who would otherwise not see the drone industry. Sean, are you still with us, Mr. Rates? You and I, last year, we engaged the Air Force, okay, the people who control the airspace in times of war, and the CA in the issues of airspace. There's a question here as to the vetting on civilian drones during COVID. we were in the state of disaster, not necessarily a state of emergency. Okay, at what point, and Mr. Chauke, you're also gonna weigh in on this one. At what point does the airspace become the responsibility of the Air Force? And at what point does it become the responsibility of the CAA? Because during COVID-19, when we contacted the CAA, they said, look, we are still in charge. Everything, all the operations must still go through us and not necessarily the Air Force. However, the Air Force, not the Air Force, particularly the security agency, the people we call the FAM, they were not comfortable with the flying of drones during COVID-19. Sean, do you want to just come in there and address the issue of civilian airspace and the military airspace? Is Sean still with us?
Victor, yes, I am. Thank you. Thanks again for a nice question. I think in terms of sort of COVID and where we are today, I mean, there's a NOTAM that was put out that basically stops all unapproved flying. There's no general aviation. There's no normal flight activities. South Africa is in a state of emergency, and so the effective control at the moment is coming through from a national directive saying, everything that's non-essential is effectively come to a stop, and aviation has not been excluded from that. Of course, the benefits of drone technology and obviously the need to move emergency cargo in and out of countries has forced that there is a capacity to approve flights and approve some operations. So what we've seen is that there's a joint control center. Every time a flight is approved, so every drone flight that's flying during the COVID lockdown, there's a flight plan that gets approved, the DOT approve it, the CIA approve it, and the ATNS approve it as well. So it's actually become quite complicated to fly drones or to fly anything during this time. I think the debate last year was, who's ultimately in control of the airspace? Is it the CIA? Is it the Air Force? Who is it? I think ultimately the military will control the airspace, and there's a delegated authority down to the CIA to look after civilian operations. So, like I said earlier on, I'm not an expert when it comes to the fine detail of this thing, but, we have had a lot of experience recently in dealing with this. And what we're seeing is really a complex environment with lots of moving parts. And so a certain amount of confusion. So, I think it was last week or before, there were groups, there's an ROC holders group with a number of ROC members on it, and information came through from the ROC holders group about a change that was brought, and that all operations a flight plan had to be approved by the DOT. The CIA wasn't aware of that. So I think communication itself has been a challenge, and you've got a lot of different stakeholders. Do the police have authority? Can the military do whatever they want to do? If you've got an ROC, are you allowed to operate? If you've got an essential services certificate, does that mean you can operate? And none of these things seem to be or insular. So it's really about a combination of a whole bunch of approvals that need to be received in order to operate. And so it's a very complex environment. And I think the one thing that does come to mind, it is the more I'm involved in this industry, the more I realize is that it's a very bureaucratic industry, and it's not ideally suited to small operators. If you're a 1 or 2 person operation, it's very difficult to know who to contact. And like I said, finding information through a WhatsApp group that was communicated to one operator before everybody else isn't really the right way for it to happen, but ultimately it's the way that things do happen. So to answer your question, I think ultimately the skies are controlled during this phase by the security cluster, and everybody's trying to work in a way that makes it sensible to conduct these operations legally.
Sean, thank you very much. Please remember, people, to vote on my little poll that I said. What is important? Airframe, payload, and software as we move towards the end of the decade. Mr. Chauke, you want to weigh in on this? Yeah, there's the poll.
Yeah, thank you.
Vote on it, please. What is most important? Sorry, Mr. Chauke, go ahead.
No problem. Thank you very much. I think all the comments and the questions center around one aspect, the issue of regulation. It's quite very clear that all the concerns that are around the use of drones, the protection of information, and all other things that raises concern, calls on us to clarify the issue of regulation. So I can speak on the private security industry. Perhaps we haven't actually started regulating drones, but we are going to regulate drones in the future. If any of the participants would like to know that, we are in the process of reviewing all the literature around the research on drones and the use and conduct, the misuse and the abuse of drones, protection of information and so on. So in the future, we'll be looking to guide the industry much more clearer as to what are the career paths to follow in terms of the use of drones, or if you want to follow any career in the private security industry that is related to drones and electronics of that kind. Also, what are the do's and don'ts? And I think earlier on when we had a discussion, there was a question about whether are we looking forward to having a classified kind of classification of specific security officers that would be using drones. Yes, it looks like in the future we're going to have something like that. Because of course we would want the technology to be adopted in our industry and to be utilized to the benefit of the public and the sharing of information, the surveillance, all the good public good, as Tony has said earlier on. We need to promote the use of drones around those aspects. So there's going to be quite a lot of developments when it comes to the use of drones in the industry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chauke. I know you've brought a very important issue that is closer to Kim's heart, to say, as we move into more technology, we know that technology, sometimes there's also the fear that it could displace people, particularly security guards. Kim, how do we fast track the training of security guards? Do you believe that right now in 2020, we should be looking at empowering security guards with drone technology and all other technologies?
Victor, absolutely. Oh, sorry. Was this a question for me? Apologies, Victor.
No, it's for you, Kim. But I want Mr. Chauke to get back on it again.
Okay, cool. So, look, I mean, the question of the fourth industrial revolution, or how it's affectionately known as 4IR in South Africa, has got people concerned for sure. And unfortunately, although a lot of the technology is going to create jobs, there is going to be entire workforce displacement. And in the security industry, where we see aerial drones taking a big part, there will be some job losses. We have conversations with security companies all the time, and some of those conversations are around affordability, and therefore how can we take out 10 guards and replace them with the drone crew, etc. We want to get away from that narrative, and we absolutely want to say, how do we upskill and reskill? And so from a regulation perspective, and also from a licensing perspective, there's a minimum criteria that an individual would need to be able to have to pass exams, and that's a whole nother story. There's a lot of manned aviation theory that you need to go through. So is there a capability and capacity there? But we absolutely see that layering, where perhaps a control room operator who's already used to some form of technology gets trained as a drone pilot. And maybe some people who don't pass the theory can become observers and pilot assistants. So the point is, everyone in those security operations could perhaps move up a notch. So that upskilling and reskilling absolutely will ensure that a workforce is not displaced, and that the advancements in technology will absolutely just take the security operation to a new level.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chauke, you want to add on that?
Yeah, thank you, Victor. Now, I just wanted to say that we, in the private security industry, we've already started engagements on the possible displacement of security officers, through the use of drones. We certainly see the positive side of it. We have engaged already with the MIC CETA around, training of security officers. I've already also met with the MERCITA around the building of some of the components of drones in the future, where security officers can be involved. The transport CETA, we've already met with them around also looking at what is it that drones can contribute in the private security industry in the future. And of course, there's a lot of areas, some of which Kim has mentioned. We're looking at also the analytics. One can look at drones as the use of drones as people are flying them, but what about people who are supposed to consume the data that is brought in by drones in the private security industry? So there's a wide range of areas in which we can train people to be able to utilize and to be effective and productive going forward into the future. So we're looking into those areas as well.
Thank you very much. Someone is saying here, I so wish that the CAA was part of this discussion, and it's extremely difficult to communicate with them. They don't return emails. I can only say welcome to the club. And also, someone is basically saying also, is technology moving too fast for the regulators? Definitely it is moving fast for the regulators, because the regulators are still using paper-based systems when there are technologies today where things can happen, even the accreditation, the permissions that can be got, things can move much quicker. I want to bring in another matter for you, Mr. Masinga. There's a bigger security cluster, because we're talking here security and surveillance. In government, there's a security cluster which involves SARPs, the Air Force, even the farm, everybody is in there. Okay. If you were to have them in one room about the drone industry, you spoke about all the borders, sea, air, on the ground, because all these borders, it's always been said that we have porous borders. We have a problem with that. Okay. We saw with the Minister Patricia de Lille's fence, what they did with it recently. If you were to address them on the issue of drones, what is it that you would say to the security cluster? But before you come in there, ladies and gentlemen, if you could please also vote on what topic you'd like us to discuss next month, because this is going to be a monthly webinar series. If you could just tell us, just say in one word, whether it's construction, whether it's skills and training and all of that, if you could just write on the chat line, just say, I'd like us to discuss this. Back to you, Mr. Masinga. Just what would you say to the security cluster?
I think I would, if I know I'm going to have all of them as an audience, I will work on putting together a really compelling story to tell them about the possibilities of what drone can do in terms of advancing their cause. And also tying in that narrative, I'll probably consult Sony to be put together that communication, but to present the positivity, for the example, so I'll bombard them with stories of how drones can really enhance law enforcement and even save lives of the law enforcement officers, even save money for the state. Drones can create bustling economies for SMMEs in South Africa if we can get the formula right of being able to localize the value chain of the drone technology. Some of the examples, in the Western Cape, for example, we have issues of gangs and drug gang wars. Now, in law enforcement, there are things called, for example, offensive mission, where you have permission to take down the guy because he has killed 4 other officers before who went to try and go take him. Now, on a mission like that, a drone support will be immensely valuable in saving the lives of the police officers you're going to send to a place where 4 of their colleagues have been killed in the last 3 months. You're sending them to go and try and apprehend that type of crew. Now, with a sophisticated drone solution, you potentially could apprehend those people who ever risking lives of safety officers. And then the intelligence to make the smart decisions that drones technology is going to bring. And I'll also just say to them, we could sit here as South Africans and be stuck in trying to come up with the right regulations while the world is moving way fast in terms of using drones to better deliver services across the board of law enforcement. From a commercial point of view, if you think about the cost of how much fuel is used to patrol a 400-kilometer border every day, and you still do not have advantage. You have 4 or 5 guys in an armored vehicle driving up and down for 400 kilometers trying to patrol a border, something that a drone will do in 4 hours and give you a much, much better advantage and at a fraction of the cost of running that crew. So there's so many possibilities that drones can bring to law enforcement and security for the benefit of the people. It's just that those that are in authority, they do not get this narrative. Like Tony said, if they think about a drone, is a guy delivering a 6-pack or things like those. So that's what I would be saying. I will show them the possibilities of what drones can do and present, and I'm saying this to this forum to say, what could be a possible positive outcome of this engagement is that there should be collaborations here where we also transform the drone sector. Sean is talking about, there's about 63 companies that are certified by the CA to fly drones or operators. How many of those operators are actually previously disadvantaged individuals or people that are favored by the current legislation? If we can, in this platform, collaborate to find projects that, because there will be, for an example, those that have drone systems like Kim and the rest of them, who may have access to drone systems, but they're looking for the right stories. So we could start an initiative where we work with communities to find areas where drones can be used to support community initiatives, and we are able to propel these stories. And then the biggest task with those law enforcement or security cluster for me, in a nutshell, would be to try and change their mindset and expose them to the possibilities of what drones can do to deliver law enforcement, and inspire them to come up with legislation that facilitates these possibilities as opposed to stopping what they fear might happen, which is unknown.
I'm going to take you up on that, Mr. Masinga. You and I, we're going to make an appointment with Minister Mosivuye Mapisa-Nqakula, and we're going to talk about this, bring all the security cluster, because she chairs the whole cluster. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give every one of you 1 minute, and but to all the listeners out there, our audience, please, before you press that end the meeting and move out, please tell us what topic you want us to discuss next month. Just in 2 words, what do you want? I can see construction, telecoms, training, licensing is coming up. Please tell us so that next month's webinar is going to be relevant. I'm going to start with you, Jack, as to just give us 1 minute. What is your shout out? What is your parting shot as far as this webinar is concerned, and where you see everything going? Just your closing remarks in not more than 60 seconds. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I think COVID-19 has caught us, perhaps as the world, quite unaware. We were sleeping, and as a country, we were in deep slumber. And we were not prepared for it regulatory-wise, to be able to deal with it, particularly taking advantage of drone-based technology to do some other things. And I think this is probably a wake-up call for us. And I'm saying to the industry as a whole, us gathered here, let's use this opportunity to lobby for drone-friendly regulations. An expansion of the use of drones in the country bodes well for all of us. It means we are growing the industry, we are beginning to imagine new possibilities, and we can all have a very good share of the cake that is there. So let's look at the areas where regulatory we need to make an impact and engage the relevant people change that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Chauke, in 1 minute, what are your closing remarks?
Thank you very much. To say to the private security industry and to everybody, the only time that we can develop in any technology is for us to adopt it and to use it as much more as possible. So the private security industry should also fall in. There is no regulation, strong regulation currently in the industry, so we invite a lot of them to actually participate in the use of drones so that we can better build and develop our country going forward.
Thank you very much. Where's Shoni?
I'm right here.
Thanks.
Can you hear me?
Yo, sure.
Yeah. So I mean, our thing is very simple. We don't do anything nearly as technologically ambitious or complicated as our fellow panelists. We just try to change the minds of a nation. So the thing that I would say is all of our other panelists are doing far more exciting individual projects than we are doing. But I think something we're succeeding in is getting our message out there. So to anyone in the industry, to any other RSC holders, the game we're playing is not competing with each other. The game we're playing is getting drones and drone sentiment positively adopted in South Africa. So if you have an exciting project like Jack has, reach out to us. We'll help you package that narrative. We'll help you put it together. And we're not playing against each other. The thing that we're playing against is a regulatory slow down and a regulatory cap. And as Sean said, everything is possible. In your op spec, in your relationship with the CAA, it's just about establishing that positive narrative. And if I think about how I want this industry to look like, and I want my company to exist in this industry in 5 years' time, I think the number one thing I would want to change is sentiment around drones. And when we call someone, the biggest difficulty we have in operating in this industry is not actually people saying no to us. It's not people not giving us the permission. It's people being too afraid to say yes, because they can't identify the positive externalities of letting us do our job. So let's very clearly communicate that, because in South Africa, the stakes are very real. So let's get those drones flying and let's get those drones out there doing good.
Thank you. Thank you. Kim, you want to make your closing shout out?
Absolutely. Thank you, Victor. I think to echo Cloney as well as Sean and Sam, we're going to be doing two things really. One, we're going to be going to the basics of protecting high value assets during these next few weeks and months, even where we're already seeing crime stats go up. So we're going to be protecting people and assets with our security operations, and very happy to talk to the private security companies, and Sam and I will take some conversations offline as well. But then the second piece is really around the bigger picture, where we're already having conversations with, but really want to be working with the public safety agencies and helping that coordination, where I know a lot of the RSC holders, when this COVID-19 lockdown came on, volunteered and said, we're in, let's go. These are our pilots, these are our aircraft. And nothing's really happened from that. So while we're knuckling down, working with the private security companies, securing people and assets, the bigger picture is there and real, and we need to be coordinating and helping with that. So we're here, let's chat, and really looking forward to where these conversations are going positively.
Thank you, Kim. Beggar, what are your last words? Not in this life, but what are your last words today?
Thank you for inviting me to the forum. I'll try and stick to the issue around, the law enforcement part and the security part of it The flip side of it is that the authorities are always having to think about what if this, and most of the time the things that could go wrong about allowing anybody and everybody to be operating and flying drones as and when they see it. So law enforcement always has to think about the other side, which has a lot to do with issues pertaining to national security. So there are solutions to that. For an example, where as this forum, as industry, we need to really also think about how do we really indigenize or localize the technologies that we're using so that they are deemed to be safe and sovereign technologies that the law enforcement can allow them free reign to roam in our skies, because these are our local technologies. We've got full control of them and their capabilities. The other part is that as a new industry that is starting, we have to be very careful that it does not also represent the image of past industries that were created during the apartheid regime. So those that are already in it, we need to be intentional about broadening it and opening it up and finding creative ways for inclusivity, so that as a new sector, when we put our face to the public, to the regulator, it is representative of the South African population in all levels of participation in it. So that number of operators that are currently allowed to fly in South Africa, the scale needs to tip and start to represent the demographics of South Africa, and that will also help in the acceptance of this new industry, because it will truly show that it's new and it carries the values and the ethos of a democratic and an equitable society and all the benefits that will come out of it. So we are here for ideas with the other colleagues to find collaboration initiatives that will actually make sure that we broaden the industry, we open it up, and whenever it shows its face, it is truly representative of the South African population.
Thank you, Mr. Masinga. You and I share the same sentiments. This is the very reason we have started the Drone Accelerator Program, and we are launching it. We are working with it in Katlehong, and we're going to Bembe this coming month of May. And yes, this industry, that's why I said it looks like it was created in the 70s, whereas this industry is hardly 5 years old, but we now have to talk about transformation of it. No, this must not happen. That's why we're saying Zizo Jig isn't. I just want to summarize, and then I'm going to give to Sean to say the last words and to thank everyone who has been here. Mr. Masinga, your task is to get us into the security cluster. Kim, your task is to talk to Mr. Chauke and basically get a program whereby we can train security guards and empower with them with the skills that include drone industry. It's not good that the people who have been into this industry, security industry, they'll be moved aside because drones are seen to be replacing them. Mr. Shiluman Jack, thank you so much for also being a sponsor for this program, and also for the work that you've done. You didn't choose to do it in the urban areas. You chose to do it in the rural areas, even where you grew up, and I appreciate you for that. Mr. Chauke, thank you so much for the security industry, being the voice in that industry. And yes, we're going to be bothering you. As much as you, Shoni, I heard what you said, and we're going to take you to Bembe district. You must learn where Bembe is. It's going to come. We're going to get the industry into those places. With these few words, and I'd like to thank you for having let me be your moderator for this session. I'm going to leave Sean to say the last words, and to thank the panelists, and also to thank the people who spent their time to come here. And I'm saying tomorrow, all the best for level 4 lockdown, and I trust that you guys will get back to work. And by the way, stay safe, and we need you in this industry. Sean, you say the last words, and then we're gonna check out.
Cool. Victor, thanks so much, and to the panelists, thank you very much as well. Almost 4 years ago, we created DroneCon, and the reason for it was really to create a platform for learning and sharing. I mean, it's not something that's there for making any money. In fact, it runs at a loss pretty much every year. If I look at today, we've got almost 400 delegates that have joined us, and the conversations are flowing. There's new people coming in, and the learning that takes place is actually amazing. I think one correction around the fact that the conversations here are really to the industry or to industry components. The fact of the matter is this is intentional for the public sector, for government. I saw an email from one of the CA representatives who was concerned about joining the webinar because it was on the Zoom platform, because of the negative publicity that Zoom has received. And I think it takes me to my next point, that the idea of not doing anything until you can get it 100% right means that most things don't get done. And there's a story of the Battle of Britain, where the UK was faced with this onslaught of German fighters, and they needed to create a radar system to allow them early warning. And the person that was developing that system had an option. Number one, get it perfect. 2, get it really good. Or 3, get something that worked well enough. And the decision was to go with option 3, because option 1 would never get done. Option 2 would take too long. And option 3 would be able to get the results right now. And I think if we look statistically at the number of drone incidents around the world where there's been a fatality in a civilian drone, I don't know of one yet. So I think that the risk factor that's being applied to our industry is potentially much higher than what the real risk is. And so I think we need to work with the regulators, work with the industry, get the narrative right. And I think, Lonnie, you brought something so worthwhile to today, to say, let's get that messaging right. Becca, if we can get to the right people and let them hear of why it's a good thing and not to only look at the negatives of it. I think one of the key contributors or contribution that the industry can make is really around a reduction of youth unemployment and repurposing people that are coming out of other industries. There's no point in having 100,000 drone pilots if you don't have work being done for them. So it is part of an ecosystem, but I absolutely believe that it's part of the future. It's not going away. And the intention of this DroneCon platform is to have these conversations. And so to wrap up, Victor, I have to say thank you so much to you for taking this and running with it and doing such an exceptionally good job putting together the panelists. And I really look forward to this being a monthly program until we actually, God willing, have the event in KZN in its physical form. But I think in the meantime, we're getting it done. And I have to say thank you to everybody for participating. Please give us your feedback. If the tech wasn't good, we use the Zoom platform. If you don't agree with it, give us alternative suggestions and participate. I mean, it's 400 people. Just by the power of your contacts, we can really drive the positive message. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to check out now, and thanks for all who have done this, and for Candice to have done a great job in the background. Thank you, the panelists. God bless.